With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey. This is a bunch of stuff, deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
It's Irish. It is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
No,
Okay.
We Irish call it malarkey.
You know what this is? Yeah, and I reserve this word for those rare instances when it's truly deserved. This is malarkey.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
Direct from the King Spring Studios in beautiful Smyrna, Georgia. This is a bunch of malarkey. Now, here's your host, the incredible Charlie McMahon.
You get malarkey. You get malarkey. Everybody gets a dose of malarkey. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for yet another episode of A Bunch of Malarkey. And thank you to the legendary Scott Shannon for that wonderful introduction, the radio voice of Z100 in New York back in the day, 95.5 WPLJ in New York, and 101.1 CBS FM nowadays with the number one rated morning show in New York. So thank you, Scott Shannon, for our weekly introduction. And thanks to all of you for joining us yet again, coming off another record-setting week of listenership. We are right at the cusp of 250,000 listens, folks. If you would have told me a year ago when I started this podcast and this crazy idea that 250,000 people would be tuning in, I would have said, you are crazy. But it's happened, and of course, we cannot do it without your support. For those of you, I should say, not those of us, for those of you who are new to the show, and we have plenty of new listeners every week. Where are we found? We're found on all major podcast platforms, and that includes iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, Radio.com, Stitcher, CastBox, YouTube, or if you have one of those Amazon Alexas, just say, Alexa, play the podcast A Bunch of Malarkey, and she will play the most current episode, which would be this one you're listening to at the moment. So we had a huge listenership last week, and I never had that many comments and emails, and people loved the topic last week, and I think people love when I make phone calls, and I've been doing these calls and for years, but people liked the interaction I had with the Popeyes employees. We did the whole thing about Popeyes running out of the chicken sandwich, the big run on chicken sandwiches, and the social media posts about people selling these bootleg chicken sandwiches out the back door, and I called up all these restaurants and kind of toyed with them a bit about this. People really loved the segment, although I got mixed reviews on the little chicken sounds in between the phone calls. Some people absolutely loved it and laughed, and other people wanted to jump through their device, their phone, tablet, or wherever else they were listening to the show and strangle me. So for those who liked it, I'm glad you did. For those who got a little annoyed at the chicken sounds, well, I apologize, but it was all good fun. So Popeyes, folks, is in the news again this week. And, haven't these people had enough bad press? They've run out of these chicken sandwiches. They're trying to compete with another restaurant, Chick-fil-A. Bad press with bootleg chicken sandwiches allegedly being sold. Now they're in the news again this week. The Popeyes chicken sandwiches remain on people's minds, as we spoke about last week. Now the fried chicken chain offered a solution to those who couldn't get their hands on the item. Bring your own bun. Yeah, folks, this is real. This isn't like an Onion article I'm reading. On Thursday, the chain tweeted a short video that urged customers to bring their own bun and make their own chicken sandwich until the popular one comes back in a few weeks. Try our new Bring Your Own Bun. It's basically the sandwich, only no mayo or pickles, and bring your own bun. Really, it's just 3 tenders, the tweet said. So I don't know if they're toying with the public, but bring your own bun? The fast food joint appeared to be making fun of itself in the tweet since nothing fancy could be added to the sandwich customers make for themselves. The formula was simple: a buttermilk battered, hand-breaded chicken fillet, a toasted brioche bun with pickles, and either mayo or spicy Cajun spread. That's the real sandwich for $3.99, which won't be back until late October. They're saying mid-October. What next, folks? Make your own clean restaurant. Bring your own broom. You're going to sweep up the place. You want to sit down? Bring your own tailgating chair. You want a clean toilet while you're at Popeyes? Bring your own toilet brush. You want to wipe your ass? Bring your own toilet paper. I mean, we're getting to that point anyway. I've spoken about it a lot on the podcast where you go into these stores, whether it be Home Depot, your local supermarket, you're basically, obviously you're doing the shopping yourself. Then you're scanning it, you're bagging it yourself. Pretty soon we're going to be mopping and you're bringing the cart back anyway if you're not a mutant. So this is what we're up against, folks. It's like these companies want to hire as few people as possible, let us do everything, and put the profits in their pockets. So when I read this, bring your own bun, and also Corey, who has been a guest on the show a couple of times, a co-host, he sent that to me too to make sure that I saw it. So Corey, thanks for that. But seriously, folks, could you imagine these mutants staggering in the restaurant, holding buns in their hands, walking in, and you know you're going to get a mutant with like a 6-foot-long bun and try to game the system and say, it's a bun, I want enough chicken to fit this. But just imagine you standing in line, people walking in with buns in their hands. I mean, come on, Popeyes, just tell people to wait however many weeks it takes to get the sandwich back in. Stop making fools of yourselves over there at Popeyes. So I thought I'd share that with you coming off our episode last week that seemed to have everybody in stitches. So speaking of mutants staggering in restaurants with buns in their hands, let's get into our favorite segment of the week.
A bunch of malarkey.
Mutant of the Week.
Now here's Charlie.
So thanks to everybody who voted in last week's Mutant of the Week poll, where the breathalyzer Better, the woman who got pulled over for drunk driving and bet the police that she would double the legal limit, she beat the Don't Bother Me burglar, the guy who broke into someone's house, started cooking food, and when the homeowner woke up, he told them, go back to bed. It was a 1-vote victory for the breathalyzer Better, and she is our Mutant of the Week winner for this week. So she will wear the crown. See, folks, every vote counts, a 54 to 46% spread, and by 1 vote. So she is the winner, and she's wearing the crown until one of these 2 nominees beat her and take over as Mutant of the Week. Now, for the new listeners, where do you go to vote for the Mutant of the Week? Easy. Go to our Facebook page, A Bunch of Malarkey. The poll goes up early Tuesday morning while you're sleeping, hitting REM sleep, 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern, 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern, and runs until midday on Saturday. So you have 5 full days to vote for the Mutant of the Week. So here are our nominees for this week. And this one comes out of Maryland. I don't think we've ever had a Maryland Mutant of the Week or nominee. A misunderstanding over loud sex led to a wild fracas, I love the word fracas, at a Maryland hotel and attempted murder charges against a 34-year-old woman, according to local authorities. Cops in Baltimore County say Allison Daughtry was taken into custody after she allegedly fired a shot and bit a security guard at the Days Inn in Towson on Monday. An officer, he had been called to the scene by a security guard who told him that 2 women were fighting in their room, according to the charging documents. However, a woman told the officer she had been having sex with Daughtry and not fighting with her. Daughtry, who was located in another room with her 3 children, also told the officer that there was not an altercation. However, the security guard asked the couple and the children to leave the hotel. The defendant later would start yelling at the security guard, who claims that she pointed a gun at his head, according to local witnesses and a TV station. Cops say she bit the right arm and the gun went off, with the bullet striking a metal frame. The security guard was hospitalized. Daughtry was charged with second-degree attempted murder and multiple weapons charges and is being held without bond. Daughtry claims the shot was fired when the weapon fell out of her bag. If I intended to ever use the gun, I would have never missed the target, Daughtry said. That'll help your case. She said that to cops. So let's call her the Mutant Motel Markswoman, even though she's not much of a markswoman, but we're going to call her that. The Mutant Motel Markswoman out of Maryland is our first mutant nominee. And our second one, folks, where else? Come on. We couldn't have a week without the Sunshine State being one of our nominees. Let's go down to Tampa, where a Florida man, I love saying that, a Florida man is accused of holding a dog hostage and demanding sexual favors from the woman who owned the dog, deputies said. Kevin Austin Skaggs, he's 36 years old, he lives in Tampa. He was arrested Friday, and he was charged with extortion, driving with a suspended or canceled license, and 2 counts a violation of probation, according to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. According to the deputies, the woman said she knew Skaggs and that he had been calling her and sending unwanted text messages for the past 6 months. Police did not release the woman's name or reveal the dog's name or breed. Come on, do we need to know that? The newspaper reported, the Tampa Bay Times. Deputies located Skaggs on Friday afternoon as he was driving with the dog in his vehicle. The dog was returned unharmed to the woman, the television station WTVT reported. So let's call him the Canine for Coochie Kidnapper. That's a good one. So, folks, you can't make this stuff up, but I like how they say the woman's name wasn't revealed. Okay, because she's a victim of a crime. But the dog's name and breed, like the dog wants to hide his identity or something. You can't make this shit up. So we've got a pretty good match this week. I don't know who's going to win that. We got the Mutant Motel Marks woman versus the Canine for Coochie Kidnapper. So go to our Facebook page. Poll goes up on Tuesday morning, and we'll run right through until Saturday. So you have 5 days to vote. Now, I mentioned last week that there won't be a show next Monday, the 23rd, because I will be traveling back to New York, my roots, Long Island, New York, for the first time in 8 years since I moved to the Atlanta metro area. So there won't be a show, but we'll be back on the 30th of September to close out the month, and we will not have any other weeks off right until Christmas time, where we'll take a 2-week break into the new year and start season 3 next year. But so we're off next Monday, and I had planned this trip in June, or actually in March, to go in June, and then it got postponed. So I'm going up there in September next week, which is a good week to go because my mother-in-law is having a milestone birthday. It'll be the 10th anniversary of my dad's passing, so I'd like to be up there to be where he's buried, spend some time there, and just see family and stuff while I'm up there. So the fact that I'm going back to Long Island for the first time in 8 years was kind of the inspiration for this week's show. It made me think of the reasons my wife and I decided to leave a place that I called home for exactly 40 years, because we closed on our house about 2 or 3 days after my 40th birthday back in 2011, and a place my wife called home for 36 years, Long Island. My siblings had already left, and many of my friends had already left Long Island before we did in 2011. So I thought this would be a good show to read you a few things about why people are leaving Long Island in record numbers. And besides just reading you some stats on a page, I also interviewed 6 people, some family members, some former coworkers, high school friends that have left New York, that moved away from Long Island, and I wanted to document their personal journeys and let you guys hear that as to why they decided to leave the Empire State, Long Island, that we grew up on, that we loved when we were growing up, and I thought this would be a great time to do it. But I want to read you a few things first. I want to talk about a survey that was done by a group called the Long Island Index last year. It says that Long Island is experiencing a mass exodus, as I just said. Let's be more precise, folks. Roughly 71% of young adults currently residing on Long Island are determined to leave it behind in the next 5 years or so. This has people around the tri-state area wondering why so many people are leaving Long Island. And the answer is simple. No prospective jobs and not enough income to afford housing. But let's go a step further and truly explore why this mass exodus is happening. Of course, as you'll hear in the interviews coming up, there are always different variables that turn people away from their current situations. And this is one of the reasons why people in the U.S. tend to relocate an average of 12 times during their lifetime. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but 12 is the average, and that fact remains, that fact is happening and doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So what is going on Long Island that is driving Long Islanders to abandon the neighborhoods they were born and grew up in? The survey mentioned shows that 59% of all adults on Long Island are likely to relocate in the years to come. And according to our research, the 3 main reasons for this are expensive housing, low average income, and no prospect of improvement on Long Island. So when that recent study was conducted in Woodbury, it found that Long Island adults between the ages of 18 and 34, as many as 41% of them still live with their parents. And why is that? Because they can't afford a place of their own. And there are two simple explanations for this. Properties are just too expensive to buy. The fact of the matter is that the cost of living on Long Island has exploded over the past decade and a half. With its vicinity to New York City, commuters looking to escape the urban jungle of the Big Apple have been taking refuge on Long Island, among other places. As a result, real estate opportunities have dropped and home prices have skyrocketed. There aren't enough housing solutions for renting. With so many newcomers in the past couple of decades, rental properties have become scarce. The only option that young adults on Long Island have nowadays is to trade in their parents' basement for the rental basement of some stranger in town. And we can't forget the cost of living, folks. According to the 2018 family budget calculation done by the Economic Policy Institute, Long Island is far from affordable. In fact, folks, the group estimates a family of 2 adults and 2 children in the Nassau-Suffolk metro area would need to earn a combined $139,545 per year to lead a normal and comfortable life. That would mean $11,629 per month before taxes. Not really what you might call an everyday income. When compared with the New York City area, this annual budget is around $15,000 higher. So young people leaving Long Island definitely have good reasons to do so from a financial perspective. So despite what we might think, folks, the fact remains that if your annual household income on Long Island goes below 6 figures, you are below the line. You can live, but you're probably running up credit card debt, second mortgages, and any other way you can obtain cash and capital. Leaving Long Island for farther and more promising opportunities, greener pastures, if you will, is becoming a more popular notion by the day because of this. Although there are profitable jobs to be found on Long Island, it's simply not enough for young adults living there. According to the Community Development Corporation of Long Island, more than 45% of the population on Long Island who are working are unable to cover their basic expenses, and wages have been stagnant. And this is one of the top 3 reasons why they decide to substitute the once comfortable surroundings of Long Island with cities outside of the state of New York. And so we come to the third large issue, folks, the lack of initiative to change the current situation. This is a complex issue that definitely can't be resolved overnight. However, sometimes the effort alone can be enough to change the minds of people and raise morale. Unfortunately, this is not the case for young people leaving Long Island in search of a better future and a better life. From their feedback and comments, they've waited long enough and simply failed to see any movement forward. You are either one of the lucky ones in the system on Long Island or among the large number of less fortunate ones. According to recent data, more than 1 million people left the New York area in the last several years. Most of them found a potential for a better life in states such as Florida, Texas, Colorado, North Carolina, Georgia, and Oregon. Young people are searching for cities that are still developing and growing every day. But like I said, folks, rather than just read statistics and state the obvious, I wanted you, the listener, to hear from actual people who have left Long Island. Each of them have their own story and their own personal journey. Again, these people include my family members, friends, former high school classmates, and former coworkers. I hope you enjoy their stories, and I will catch you on the other side after the interviews conclude. If you've been listening to A Bunch of Malarkey for a while now, you've heard many stories about my crazy childhood, from killer bees to 110-degree shed clean-out days. My childhood was chock full of dysfunction, and my first guest lived through those crazy times with me, and that person is my sister Angela, and she joins us now from Port St. Lucie, Florida. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on. So, obviously the topic's about everyone fleeing Long Island and New York. So, how long did you tell our listeners how long you lived in New York?
40 years.
Same amount of time I did.
Yeah, 40 years.
I guess that's the threshold of tolerance, 40 years.
Yep.
So how many years now have you lived in, you're in Port St. Lucie now, but you lived in other areas of Florida. So you're in the state of Florida. How many years have you been in Florida now?
10 years.
10 years. So why did you decide to up and leave Long Island and New York where you grew up, and why'd you relocate down to the Sunshine State?
Just wanted to start a new life. Things in my life were changing, and I figured, why not a change of scenery? So decided Florida seemed like a good state. It was sunny and nice weather. So, yeah, it was just to start a new life.
Despite all the crazy news stories you hear about a Florida man or a Florida woman, it's nice.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where most of our mutants come from, as you know from listening to the show.
Oh, yeah. I live amongst them. They're everywhere.
So when you moved, what were the most difficult adjustments when you relocated for people that might be considering uprooting and going somewhere else? What are some of the difficult adjustments that had to be made?
Well, when I moved down, I moved to the west coast of Florida, which is a lot different than where I'm at now. I guess one of the big adjustments was everything closed early. Like there was nothing open. It was like desolate at 9 p.m. It was like they rolled up the sidewalks and everybody went inside, and it was just really quiet. I guess another thing would be adjusting to the slower pace. Everything is very different than New York down here. It's just a lot of, just slower. Everybody's more relaxed. I had to learn to get off that New York hectic, way of life, And then I guess the other thing I would say, dealing with the heat year-round. It's hot all the time. So that was a big adjustment.
What about it like Christmas time? Does it feel like Christmas, or have you gotten used to it now after 10 years?
No, it definitely does not feel like the holidays. Totally different down here. The stores are all packed with Santa Clauses and all the snowmen and all that, but it's just, it's hot. You're
right.
Decorating, and it's still 85 degrees. You're sweating.
Yeah, I remember.
No, it's different feel, completely different feel. I'm used to it now, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, I remember the first year we moved to Atlanta in 2011, and we were decorating the day after Thanksgiving for Christmas, and we were out there in shorts, and like bees were buzzing around us, and then some years it's cold and some years it's not, but it's not like you're dealing with heat no matter what the year is.
Yeah, no, it's very, very rare that we get a cold day. Very rare. So.
So what were some of the easier adjustments when you relocated that were just real easy to make transitions to?
I guess meeting people. Everyone's really friendly. Everybody down here is like a transplant from some other part of the country or part of the world.
Right.
So it seems like everybody's kind of in the same boat. Everyone's kind of just trying to find their way and settle in. So people tended to be very friendly, especially on the west coast of Florida.
Right.
You had a lot of Midwesterners and Canadians, and they were just very friendly and warm and welcoming. And I guess another thing would be eating healthier, because it's hot all the time.
Right.
So you tend to want to eat healthier and not so heavy like up in New York. It's
right, like a vat of fried food when it's 95 degrees out doesn't jive.
Yeah, you tend to opt more for the salad.
Right. So what three things would you say you miss the most about New York?
I would say taking the Long Island Railroad to New York City.
Right.
I miss that mass transit option to go into, a metropolis.
Mm-hmm.
I miss the culture, the art, the fashion, the theater district. We lack that here. I mean, they try their best down here, but it's not even close. And I guess I do miss fall. I miss that,
right.
That first crisp day where, you get to wear the sweater and the boots. We don't really get that down here.
You smell that first fireplace go on.
Yeah, I tend to miss that down here. I mean, we do get cooler weather as winter progresses, but, 75 is not really what I consider, cool,
Right.
fall-like weather.
Do you miss any of the food? Or you've outgrown it already?
Yes and no. I mean, you can find good food down here. It's just a lot of trial and error. Like you can find that one good pizzeria down here, but you have to eat a lot of bad pizza
Right.
before you find it.
A lot of research.
So, I'm not really a big foodie kind of person, so I adapt.
Right.
I'm not like, oh my God, I want a bagel, like you can find good food
Right.
here.
You just have to research. It's not like it was 25, 30 years ago. There's a lot of transplanted people that know how to cook.
Yeah, especially here in Port St. Lucie. I mean, a lot of people are from New York, especially because we have the Mets training camp down
Right.
here. So there's a lot of New York transplants. So, they do their best in trying to bring New York down here.
Right.
So, it's pretty good.
So what three things would you say you miss the least about New York? What three things are you like, I'm so glad I'm out of there?
Oh, winter. Absolutely winter. The snow, the ice, just dealing with that gray, dingy, just horrible gray skies and the dead trees for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's pretty much gray from Thanksgiving until like St. Patrick's Day up there.
Oh yeah, I don't miss that at all. The high expense for everything.
Right.
Like it's just not that it's super cheap anymore down here in Florida,
Right.
but it's a lot cheaper than it was living on Long Island. I mean, it's impossible, especially if you're by yourself, to
Oh,
live.
absolutely.
It's impossible. So I don't miss the high expense.
Right. I think that's
everything.
based on the research I did and talked about at the beginning of the show, that's the biggest reason people are fleeing New York and the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, is the high cost of everything. And you can't blame people for wanting to get more for their money.
Oh yeah, the taxes are just unbelievable, and the price of everything. It's I don't know how families do it up there anymore. I really don't.
Well, plus the big hidden expense that you come to realize when it's not really hidden when you're living up in north, but when you move down here, you don't have that oil man coming and filling that tank every 4 weeks with a $500 bill.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, we do have like the AC and
Right,
the electric bill, but that levels off. As
Right.
the weather cools a little bit, you can open up the windows, and it's doable.
Right.
July and August, it's a little tough.
Yeah.
But but other than that, yeah, I don't miss the high heating bills and all of that.
Right.
Is crazy.
So I'm taking my first trip back to New York since we relocated here to the Atlanta suburbs next week. First time in 8 years I'll be on New York soil. Have you been back to New York, or do you frequently visit?
No, I have not been back since I left in 2009.
Now, if someone would
gone back.
have told you when you were getting ready to move, you wouldn't come back for 10 years, would you have said you're crazy? Did you think you'd be back to visit, or you really, this is what you expected?
I thought I'd be back at least once or twice, but I haven't even really had a desire to go back.
Right.
To be honest, I really haven't. So, no, I really don't miss it that much.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be 8 years for me. I thought I would have gone back sooner, but better late than never, I guess. I'm just curious to see how much it's changed, and I know now that we're connected with social media, you get to see what's going on there and what's going on in people's lives and stuff, but I don't think you really can see the changes until you touch down there and take a walk around and go into places to see how much it's really changed in almost a decade, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm sure it has.
Oh, I'm sure. So what have you gotten used to in Florida that you now are so used to that you couldn't do without going forward? Like, you're so used to it that, like, this is my lifestyle and I could never do without this.
Oh, the weather. Absolutely the weather. I mean, I can't even imagine owning a winter coat and bundling up with boots and a scarf. I can't even imagine life like that anymore. So definitely the weather, I would never give this weather up. You get used to the heat, you know, everyone's like, oh, it's so hot and humid, but honestly, you do. Your body adjusts to it, and after a while down here, it doesn't even faze you. I mean, it's hot, but it's not to the point where you're so uncomfortable that you're, it's, you get used to it. And I enjoy everything being green and in bloom year-round.
Right, you don't like that dead
so
phase.
Nice. Yeah, it's like so nice when you're driving up the highway or around. You see flowers in bloom and the trees and the grass is green.
Right.
It just puts you in a different mental state when you see that, as opposed to New York when everything just, the leaves fell off the tree and now you just see this dingy darkness. And
come on, there's nothing like the Belt Parkway in spring.
No.
So I guess you answered my next question. Would you ever relocate back to New York?
Oh, no, never.
And why not?
Never.
Just for strict, for a lot of the reasons you just talked about, the high cost and the dinginess and the
Oh yeah, the gray skies, and just everything felt very old and dirty up there. Like you come down here, it's newer. It's just
right.
I guess because everything is green and pretty, and it's just new houses.
Right.
It's just a totally different vibe.
Well, on Long Island, everything was built up already by like the 50s and 60s. There's no place to really put anything new. I mean, there are some new subdivisions and stuff up there, but there's really no place to put anything.
Yeah, but even just the style of homes,
right.
And it's just a totally different vibe, Like everything down here is just new, open concept. Whereas, I don't know, up in New York, everything was just very boxy and just old-fashioned.
Right.
Just not for me.
So, to close it out, what advice would you give to someone who's listening, who's living on Long Island or in New York, who's thinking about relocating to Florida? What advice would you give them?
I would definitely say do it and never look back. I regret not doing it sooner. Like I said, I've never been back, and I don't look back. I would also say do your research beforehand.
Right.
A lot of people, think Florida is Miami or Fort Lauderdale, but there is so many different places in Florida that are truly beautiful, and, just do your research. There are, it's just really nice places to raise a family, grow old, but the research is key,
Absolutely.
If you're young and you're looking for more of a city vibe, then, you would stay more towards that Miami, Fort Lauderdale city atmosphere, but there's a lot of places where it's very country and very laid back and quiet, and a great place to raise a family or retire. Just do your research.
Absolutely.
Personally, I would highly recommend it. I think Florida gets a bad rap because of all that, the Florida man
right.
and whatnot.
The mutants.
But you know what? There's that Florida guy in every state.
Absolutely.
We do get a bad rap, but honestly, it's a great place. I'm very, very happy here in Florida.
Well, you're a good ambassador to the Sunshine State. Well, we thank you for spending a few minutes with us, and I'm sure the listeners will find it very informative. And I guess enjoy your time down in Florida, and I guess you have no plans on going back anytime soon.
No, enjoy your trip back up and take lots of pictures.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
My next guest was a high school classmate, and I think junior high as well, but who the hell remembers back that long? Back on Long Island. Our graduating class of 1989 closed out the 80s decade with style and class. Yes, we did. His posts about Syracuse University on Facebook always keep me laughing. And with a name like Charlie, how bad of a guy could he be? Charlie joins us from the Birmingham, Alabama metropolitan area. Charlie, welcome to A Bunch of Malarkey.
Oh, thank you very much. How are you doing today, Charles?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for spending some time with us. And I guess my first question, Charlie, we haven't spoken in a long time. When did you leave New York?
Oh, jeez. Christ. Left New York probably, it was, well, I left Long Island, went up to Syracuse.
Right.
Graduated Syracuse in 93. From there, I went to podiatry school down in Philly.
Okay.
And I was there till 97. Did a residency in Delaware left there in 98. So 98, moved down here.
Okay, so you're 21 years. So 21 years in your current state. So why did you?
Oh my God.
Yeah, when we say it like that, it's like, whoa, right?
Wow.
So what made you choose Alabama?
Help wanted ad.
Okay.
When I was during residency, got back from my honeymoon and realized there was no more school for me. Which is a really horrifying thought. Because I had always been in school doing something, and residency was like going to end up, and I needed to find a job. So went online and started looking and found the help wanted section for podiatry, or so as it was back then, and wound up down here. And they were the first ones listed, so I called them up and flew down for an interview.
Sure.
And worked out pretty nicely.
So I guess my big question is, like, my family and friends thought I was nuts when I told them I was moving to Georgia. What did your friends and family say when you said, hey, I'm moving to Alabama?
I remember when I accepted the job, and I called my wife, and I said, hey, guess what? She goes, oh, God, no. and it went from there. Basically, most people were like, well, you go where you can get a job. Right. And, so most of my family was like, well, we can fly there.
Right.
And Kim wound up being happy because it's a much shorter trip to Disney from here.
Right, exactly.
And so, it wasn't like shock and horror, but it was, it was a lot of the stereotypical, like, oh my God, it's all hillbillies. It's going to be all that. And it's not.
Banjos in the distance.
Exactly. You don't have to go far, though, to find that.
No.
Don't get me wrong. But it's...
Well, in New York, you don't have to go far to find that either. People forget about upstate New York. It's the same way up there in a lot of parts.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So I guess that leads into my next question. What was the most difficult adjustments you had, like, a couple of adjustments that were difficult that you had to make when you relocated?
Probably the hardest thing was the speed.
Right.
Speed and attitude of things, of people getting stuff done.
Right.
One of the more difficult things was just, I had developed, such a way of treating and talking to patients. It was like, hey, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this, and if you don't do this, well, your foot's going to fall off. And that was accepted. That was fine.
Right.
I did that to a couple patients here, and they were terrified. They were crying. I'm like, what? Like, no one's ever told. I'm like, what would they tell you?
Well, we're pretty straightforward from New York. People learn that very quickly.
Right, and I wasn't oh, that's okay, and you're going to be,
Right.
Also, there's what's the proper terminology for it? It's, if you're a type A person up in New York, you do very well because you're like, you come in, you get your work done, you go home.
Right.
Here in the South, and it's more of, well, you sit around, you chat, you do some stuff, and the work gets done eventually, and it'll be relax. It's like, no, get this
Right,
done.
right. I think we stress people out, right? We stress people out when we bring that attitude to where they're from.
It's true. Yeah, it's just weird how it doesn't. And to this day, I mean, it's been 20-something years,
Right.
and to this day, it's still, like that's what you're going to get from me.
Right, you can't take it out of us. It's ingrained. Even no matter how many
No.
years we've been away, I totally agree with that. So what were the easiest adjustments you had to make? Like, what was an easy transition for you when you moved to Alabama? Like, that just came naturally, that you didn't even have to think twice about?
Eating.
Okay.
In college, I worked in one of the cafeterias and dining halls. And it was the dining hall where all the football players ate.
Right.
And I worked breakfast shift, and it was grits every day for a lot of these guys. Grits and sausage and bacon and eggs. And I'm like, grits, really? And they made me eat this, and I'm just like, oh, yeah. Eating this every day,
And then,
that was fantastic.
so you fit right in when it came to the food aspect of it.
I could sit down, eat barbecue, grits for breakfast, cheese grits, barbecue shrimp, all kinds of good stuff. And yeah, I was all about that.
That's awesome.
So that was the easiest thing.
So what 3 things do you miss the most about Long Island or New York?
Hysterically, I miss mass transit.
My sister actually said that, and I can totally get that.
And because I hate that I have to drive everywhere.
Right.
I wish that there was a train that went to the beach. I wish there was a train.
Right.
Because that'd be great. But there's not.
Or to the ball game or to a sporting event where you didn't have to drive and
Exactly.
park. And
You don't have to drive, sit in traffic for a week and a day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not as bad as you guys have it over in Atlanta, but, here on game days, you go down to Tuscaloosa or out to Auburn or whatnot, it's nightmarish.
Right.
Because it's all little 2-lane roads. It's like, what are you doing, people?
Yeah, I say that a lot. I miss being able to hop on a train, put a beer in a paper bag, and be on my way.
Exactly. And you're in downtown Manhattan in
Right.
45 minutes if you catch the express.
Mhm.
Hour plus if you're not. But I miss the city. It's as weird as that sounds too. It's because people here think that what we would consider a suburb is like a big city. I'm
Right.
like, oh dear God, no. It's you really don't get it.
Yep.
And like they're terrified of the concept of New York. I'm like, what? It's New York City. It's
Right.
fine.
To me, Atlanta's like Mineola. When we came in here and drove into Atlanta on a Friday afternoon, we were like, where are the people? There was nobody walking around. We were like, this is like Mineola or Carl Place on a Friday. This is a city.
Yeah, well, no one walks anywhere.
Right.
Nobody, because it's 1,000 degrees outside.
Right.
And it's so yeah, but no one walks.
Do you miss the food?
Oh, see, now this is going to be the thing. The third thing. It's 2 things. I miss the food. I miss bagels. It's such a huge thing. I really miss bagels, and I miss being able to get from where we grew up, being able to get to the beach, where the beach was like the default. Like, well,
Right.
there's nothing else to do today.
Just go to
Now
the
we'll go to
beach.
the beach.
Yeah.
Now it's like, all right, we want to go to the beach. Well, okay, we got to make reservations at a hotel. We gotta,
Right.
It's a drive. It's like,
We kind of took it for granted.
oh, it's hysterical how bad we did.
And what do you miss the least about New York? What 3 things would you say, I'm so glad I'm out of there, I would never want to do that again?
The Belt Parkway, because people here don't know traffic. They think they know traffic. Atlanta's catching up, but
Yes.
no, there's nothing like the Belt. I miss least. We never had it because I didn't live there long enough to own property. We bought our first house down here.
Right.
But property taxes.
Sure.
And the first time we went shopping for a house down here, that's because Kim is from Jersey. So we both are like, yeah, taxes. This is going to be the big thing.
Right.
So, and, we're looking at this one house, and it's this really nice house, nice over in Hoover, nice part of town, and it's like a four-bedroom, 3.5, 4-bath or whatever it was. And I'm like, well, what are taxes? And the guy was like embarrassed. He's like, well, they're high.
Right.
I'm like, all right, well, what do you got? He goes, they're about 600. And, so Kim and I are looking at each other going, that's awesome. 600 a month. This is great.
Yeah.
And and he's like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, we had this exact same conversation with a realtor that said, the taxes are kind of high here. And we said, okay, so we're bracing ourselves. And she said $2,500. And we're like, we're paying $10,000 in Bethpage.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. It's like the same thing. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do you?
No, that's like one of the other thing that I missed least. Geez, what did I miss least? I don't know. I mean, those are like the big the big things right there.
Do you visit New York frequently? And if so, like, what are the most noticeable changes that you've seen there since you left?
I do. We go up for the 4th every year. Shut that, it gets us out of here for a week, and during the summer, and it's nice. So we get up, we go, see mom and dad. My sisters come down. We see my wife's parents. It works out well. And just basically in West Islip, seeing just some of the changes. I love what they've done to Babylon Village. I don't know if you've been up at all to see what they've done there.
My first trip back to New York is next week. My first trip back in 8 years, so I'll have to check it out.
Dude, it's become like there's nice restaurants. The old movie theater is now like a Broadway theater.
Oh, wow.
And they have they've got shows that come through in there and everything, and it's gorgeous. They've got a couple high-end like cheese and wine shops going on.
Right.
It's amazing what the village has become.
Everybody says they notice things like are smaller and more closed in when they go back to New York. Is that true? Did you find that? Do you find that when you go back? Like the houses and the neighborhoods and everything?
It's looking now, it's stunning how small our property was.
Right.
When you go drive down past where you grew up, and you're gonna be like, these houses are all on top of each other, and they were.
Right.
There was you had like 10 feet between houses, and you're like, yeah, that's plenty of room because you could run through it.
Right.
And that was it. But now here, Christ, every piece of property is, and the people who are listening, like up in New York, going, excuse me, I'm on 3/4 of an acre of property.
Right.
And that's not that big.
No. Well, with my loudmouth Italian mother, I knew that we were so close to the neighbors. They heard every conversation. We could hear my mom like 4 houses down in my friend's pool. That's how close the houses were to each other.
Yeah, that's about right.
What have you gotten used to in Alabama that you couldn't do without going forward? What have you gotten so used to that you say, maybe it isn't your last stop in life, but that you really like and say, wow, this is something I really like and I wouldn't want to be without this?
What I get, what I have for housing.
Right.
I mean, it's for what we pay. It's stupid.
Right.
And it's the mortgage payment. It's crazy when you tell people what you pay for a mortgage and they back up in New York or whatnot, or even like in other states. And it's like that's it. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. So we're paying. And that the lifestyle that allows us to have,
right,
is pretty awesome.
More disposable income. You can travel. You could do things that you couldn't do in New York.
Well, exactly. I mean,
right.
Christ, for property taxes. Okay, for the house that we have, and on the property that we have up in New York, it would be a $700,000 house.
Absolutely.
So whatever. So your taxes in that would be what, like 15? Say,
easy.
15 a year.
Easy.
Okay. And here I'm paying $1,500 a year.
Right. That would be like another mortgage payment just in taxes in New York.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's another, there's $60,000, well, not $60,000, like there's another $13,000 plus a year of just, of difference of money that I can spend and do stuff.
Do things that you want to do, right? Would you ever relocate back to New York? And if yes, why? Or if no, why?
I would.
You would.
I would. I miss it, and maybe it's that I miss family.
Right.
And because like I said, my parents are still up there, and my parents, at the drop of a hat, can drive down and see my sister, or drive up and see my other sister. You have to take the ferry to get up to Rhode Island. You got to get down to Delaware, but they can make that drive in
one day. Yeah.
Right. For me, it's like, it's 1,000 miles.
Right, and you want your kids to see their grandparents and everything else.
Right, and to see their cousins, and like down here, it's like everyone's like, oh yeah, we're going to go out, so mom and dad are going to come by and watch the kids. It's like, oh geez, I would, mom and dad to come down and watch the kids. I got to buy a plane ticket.
Right. But go ahead.
No, it's yeah, but that would be just be closer to
just
family.
For family.
Yeah.
All right, and to close it out, Charlie, what advice would you give to a New Yorker that is thinking about relocating to either your state of Alabama or to another part of the country? What advice would you give them?
Basically, shut up and listen.
Mm-hmm.
We like to, everybody has, their opinion on where they're from, and, they have, a lot of people have, things in their head of where they're going, and it's really different.
Right.
Okay. Listen to what people say. Learn what different things, when they say them, what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It took forever for me to figure out, oh, bless his heart.
Right.
Which is basically, hi, I'm stabbing you in the back.
Right.
Bless your heart.
Exactly.
Bless your heart. You're the dumbest person on earth. It's like, wow, that's nice, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, it's also, there's if you're moving to the South, get used to talking about religion a lot.
Right.
Because that's one of the first questions you're going to be asked is, have you found a church yet?
Right.
And growing up, the only time you talked about church was when you're online at the bakery after church and you said, hey, I saw you at church.
Yes.
Here it's like, okay, well, church is on Sunday, and then we have church again on Wednesday. And I'm like, you can't wait till Sunday?
Right.
What's going on? It's like, nope, gotta get back. I'm like, really? It's Wednesday. Okay.
Right, I know what you mean.
But that was a huge thing, because our office, we used to try to have late hours, and I'm like, yeah, we'll have late hours on Wednesday.
Right.
And everyone's like, you can't do
that. Can't do that.
Why? Everyone's at church.
Right.
And it was true. I'm like, wow, no one's showing up.
It's the best time to go food shopping in the South is Sunday morning around 10, if you're going to go.
Oh, God, yes.
There's nobody around.
There's no one in the stores. It's fabulous. But yeah, the religious thing is huge. So you got to figure that out, and and just get used to everybody inviting you to their church, which is the weirdest. It's still weird to me. I'm like, why would you invite me to you don't know me?
Exactly.
Why do you? Also, everyone will assume that you're Christian. It's
yes.
It's if you're Jewish or Church of the Spaghetti Monster, Pastafarian, if you're doing the whole Muslim thing, it doesn't matter. They just assume you're Christian. It's like, and that's wild.
Right.
I mean, and religion is everywhere. It's in your schools. It's in your schools. It's and it's weird that it is.
Maybe I come across very abrasive because I've never been asked to go to church. Maybe they just see me coming and they're like, "Nah, we don't want this guy in our church."
No, they hear you. As soon as you open your mouth, like, no.
Well, you haven't picked up an accent either, Southern accent. I don't pick up any accent at all from you.
Well, we've moved enough, and I think living in Philly the 4 years helped.
Right.
And upstate New York, because people think I'm from the Midwest. They're like, you're from like Minnesota? I'm like, well, it's close.
Right, because you don't have that thick New York accent anymore. Well, I don't know if you ever did, but I think we all did to a point. But I don't sense that either from you. It's pretty no accent, really.
Right, and well, you don't. I can tell by the tone you're from New York.
Right.
But you've picked up. You don't have a lot of the language quirks that we used to have.
I'm getting better.
And also, you're talking slower.
Yeah.
What's funny is, every now and then I'll call up and we'll have somebody that we have to deal with for for ordering stuff or whatnot that's up in New York. And as soon as I hear the accent, my speech picks up.
Yep.
It's a completely different pattern. I'm talking faster, and it's wild.
Yeah, I might come back after next week talking quickly again.
Oh, you're going to. You're going to come back. You're going to be cursing like it's a comma.
Well, I do. I do that anyway still. If you listen to the show, you know that.
Oh, that's true. Oh, that's the other thing. And I don't understand. Okay, if you're moving to Alabama, all right, and I know, at least for Alabama, damn is just as bad a four-letter word as any of the others, and I still can't figure out why.
Maybe because there's a religious overtone to it.
Well, probably.
Yeah.
But I walked into my kid's daycare once, and I was on the phone, and I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about? God damn it!" And I'm just talking, and I got pulled aside by the director saying, "You can't curse like that in here." I'm like, "What the hell am I saying?"
You throw a hell in there too.
Exactly. I'm like, what are you talking about? I haven't said a curse yet. I've been very good.
Yeah, because our definition of curses and their definition of cussing is two different things.
Oh, God, yes. Yes, it is.
Well, Charlie, what's that?
If you don't want to bless your heart, you're okay.
Yes. Well, Charlie, I really appreciate you spending some time. It was great catching up, and I wish you continued success in Alabama or wherever you may end up. And I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope you enjoy listening to it.
I do, and not a problem. And next time we're out in Atlanta, we'll try and hit you up.
Absolutely. All right, you take care.
Awesome. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye, Charlie.
Bye-bye.
My next guest shares the same birthday as me and also was a part of all the crazy family stories I talk about often here on A Bunch of Malarkey. His name is Brian. He's my younger brother, who's exactly 2 years younger than me, and he joins us tonight from Raleigh, North Carolina. Brian, welcome to A Bunch of Malarkey.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that was great. So we're talking today about relocations to other states. Leaving Long Island is our topic. And you were kind of the first in the family to get out of New York. We had our sister Angela on earlier, but you were the first one to leave. So how long did you live in New York?
I'm going to give away my age now.
That's okay.
The first 33 years of my life was spent on Long Island.
And you've been in North Carolina for, what, like 13 years now?
Yes, 13 years.
So we gave away your age. So why did you decide to relocate at the time? What was going on that made you say, all right, I had enough of Long Island?
I think it mainly was the cost of living. I felt like even though how much you worked and saved, you just could never, get ahead up there.
Right,
The climate, the winters, the dreary, cold, dark winters.
Right.
Climate just wasn't doing it for me anymore. And then just an overall, I needed a change. I was like, wow, I'm in my 30s and I just needed a change from everything.
Right. So, what did your, close friends and coworkers and family say when, what did they think when you told them you were leaving New York? Now, I'll admit that I thought you were a little crazy. You being the first one. I was always one of those New Yorkers who never thought I was going to leave, and why would anybody want to go down there? So what was the overall reaction by your coworkers or your friends or even family members when you said, I'm going to North Carolina?
Oh, everybody thought I was crazy. They thought I was nuts. Like, why Why of all places Raleigh, North Carolina? What does Raleigh have that New York doesn't have?
Right, but you did a lot of research.
I did. I researched this area for almost a year, and I took a couple of visits, just to see what it was all about. But again, everybody thought I was crazy, and it was actually one of my colleagues in my job that moved down here like a year prior to me moving here, and she was writing to all of us and saying how wonderful it was. And, it was a new beginning for her and her husband, and
right.
children, and the economy, the job market, everything was so strong, and I was like, okay, a little light bulb went off, like, okay, if they can do it with kids and uprooting everything, as a single guy, why can't I just start over and take those challenges and start over and whatnot.
Yeah, I think like Southerners and other parts of the country think of New Yorkers as like loudmouth, abrasive, and New York is really crazy and there's mean people. I think New Yorkers have the same stereotype about Southern states. They pictured, Georgia or North Carolina as like, you're sitting in the middle of the woods playing a banjo. They don't realize that like the metropolitan areas are pretty much the same, and the suburban areas are pretty much the same as New York.
Exactly. Like when I first came here, like on my first visit, it's almost like they picked up Long Island and put it here. It was just suburbs, homes, shopping malls. It was much greener here, of course.
So you haven't heard any banjos?
No banjos. If you go a couple of hours out of Raleigh, I'm sure, in the steps. But overall, it's just like you said. It's just another suburban mecca. It's just. It worked. I was like, okay, this can work.
Sure. So when you moved, what were the most difficult adjustments you had to make when you relocated? What was hard to adjust to, if anything?
I think, not knowing anyone. Of course, you're coming here with no one. You don't know anybody. But, I knew that was going to change once I started working and stuff. You meet people at work and whatnot. Put yourself out there. At the very beginning, I would say some of the food. I'm not really into the southern type of food. I'm here 13 years and I'm still not into anything really southern, like barbecue and whatnot.
Black-eyed peas.
Yeah, I tried southern food, but I'm just not into that type of food.
You got to like red velvet cake, though, right?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't like red velvet cake. No, so I would say just like, I know that's probably stereotypical to say like, the food, but now, fast forward now, you adapt, you get to learn, the area and whatnot, and with the influx of so many different people from all parts of the country coming here,
absolutely
definitely changed, and a lot of the stuff that you could find in New York or any other regions of the country, you can find. So
that kind of leads into my next question. What were the easiest adjustments when you relocated? What was easy to adjust to?
I think the overall environment, like it was like the weather for one, it's always sunny here, year round, pretty much it's sunny, and I think just treading the new territory, learning the area, being a little bit more adventurous.
Right.
New surroundings, making friends, meeting people, stuff like that. That was pretty easy, to start a new journey here.
Right, because on Long Island, there's only so far you can go 30 miles wide and 100 miles long. There's only so far you can branch out, really.
Yeah, it's true. You miss, everybody has friends, but you always have, close friends.
Right.
So you miss, those core close friends, that you still have contact with, that I still have contact with. But, But again, you make new friends, so I knew that everything would fall into place.
So what are the 3 things you miss the most about Long Island or New York? 3 things that you say, I still miss that.
I think it's the connection, to your roots. I know you'll never, just that deep connection of where you grew up and maybe nostalgia. Like when you were on Long Island, you may not have still lived in the town you grew up in, but you could take a ride in the car and go past the house you grew up in,
right?
Or go to that restaurant that you liked, or stuff like that, or your Sunday morning routine, get a bagel and a paper,
right?
Stuff like that. But and just being familiar with everything. I'm here 13 years and I know Raleigh pretty well, but you just don't feel like that sense of like I know everything about Raleigh. Where where we grew up, we probably knew a lot about
right.
the town we grew up in.
Well, and a lot of that information and stuff was passed down from grandparents and parents, so you were more ingrained and rooted in your knowledge as well.
Exactly.
So what do you miss the least, or was there any other things that you miss about New York before I interrupt and go on to the next question?
No. I mean, but sometimes the pace. I mean, it's not super slow here in Raleigh.
Right.
It's not super fast, and it made me learn to relax a little bit more and not have to go at that fast pace.
Right.
But sometimes, I know you've talked about this in some of your podcasts, like, you just want to check out and not hear the whole life story of the cashier
right.
in front of you, But, so sometimes the pace, if you just pick it up a little bit. But
absolutely.
Other than that, I don't really miss much about New York.
So what do you miss the least about New York? 3 things you miss the least that you say, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that anymore.
I think the weather is in the top, that those
snowstorms.
The snow, the darkness of winter, and just the overall, change in seasons was very, hard to go through,
Right.
From, say, fall to winter. Probably, the congestion of, traffic and stuff. I know that's a cliche. A lot of people say, oh, it's so congested up there. Not that other cities aren't congested, with traffic and whatnot, but not having to drive, an hour to work each way on the
right.
495, stuff like that, and overall cost of everything.
Oh, yeah, that's the big one.
You just the cost of everything. I mean, the homes and everything. I don't miss that at all.
So have you visited New York since you moved, and do you frequently visit there?
I haven't visited in 4 years. When I first moved down here, I was going at least 2 to 3 times a year up until 2015. But every time I went back, I was shocked, how things have changed, how dirty it looked.
Right, in comparison, right.
In comparison to where I was living. So, yeah, I haven't been up in 4 years, so.
So what other than the dirtiness you mentioned, what are the most noticeable changes you've seen in New York over the past, whether it be the full 13 years or just by going back every year or two, and what big changes have you seen?
Everything just seems so smaller and cramped to me.
Right.
It's not as spread out as what I'm used to here. I don't know. Everything just seems so small and cramped.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel the same anymore. It doesn't feel like the place that we knew, where we grew up in. And
it's like when you go to visit your elementary school, it's like a high school, or that place seems like it's so tiny, right?
Exactly. You're like, oh my gosh, the streets are so narrow, and everything is so packed tight together,
Right.
But I mean that's noticeable changes. Aside from that, I haven't really. Again, I haven't been up in 4 years.
Right.
But the times I've gone, that's mainly what I've noticed.
What have you gotten used to in North Carolina that you couldn't do without going forward? That wow, this is great. This is where I want to be. What have you gotten so used to in North Carolina that you wouldn't change?
I would say not to dwell on the weather, but just how everything here is so green and so sunny all the time. I could never imagine going back to, that snowy, dreary, those winter days.
Well, you don't like 5 months of overcast skies?
No, but I just, how everything is green, and you drive around, there's always flowers and everything blooming, and I'm not saying the middle of January.
Right.
most of the year, everything, even in the winter here, everything is so green. We have so many, trees and pines and whatnot. It's just a different
feel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different feel. But other than that, I mean, that was a tough question because I can't really think. I was thinking to myself, if I had to leave North Carolina tomorrow, what would would there be something I would miss that I would, honestly couldn't think of anything.
You'd miss the cost of living if you had to go back to a state like New York.
I would miss the cost of living. Yeah, that's true.
So would you ever go back to New York? Would you ever relocate back to New York for any reason?
I mean, I'm open to it. I'll never say never because you don't know, where life can take you. But, I would probably say no, but you never know. It wouldn't be something I would want to research and explore to move back, but I would rather remember it the way it was when we were kids and teenagers and whatnot, and not try to force something that can't be,
If you were to go back to New York, would you go back to Long Island, or would you go to like a different part of New York, like maybe upstate or something?
I think if I had to move back to Long Island, it probably would be like the eastern end, even further, maybe like really further out on the north or south shore, but
not Nassau or Western Suffolk County.
Or even do like the total opposite and do like the city experience for like a year or two. That's something I always wanted to do and never did.
I did that. It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, like we talk about that. Maybe get like a little dinky apartment in the city and spend a year there or whatever. But it's not something on the top of the list to do.
Right. All right, so let's close it out with this question. What advice would you give to someone that's now living in New York, that's listening, or Long Island, that's thinking about moving to North Carolina or even another part of the country, but specifically North Carolina where you live? What advice would you give to them if they're considering leaving Long Island to come live in North Carolina?
I would say do your research, take trips to the area that you want to move to, no matter what state it is. I think that's important.
Right.
Really, research and visit the place where you're thinking about moving to, and just know that there's life outside of New York. There's, don't think outside of that box.
Right.
You can do it. I mean, I even tell some of my close friends I'm still friends with up there that. There's a life outside of New York. You hear about them going on vacation to Florida or California. They just get that vacation experience.
Right.
Just think outside. You can do it outside of Long Island. There is life outside of there.
Yes, there is.
You can't be stuck in that, New York is the only place you have to live.
Right.
I mean, it's where I grew up. I'll always love New York. But, you can do it at someplace else, and even better, I think.
Well, that's good advice. Definitely good advice. So I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out with us, and I'm sure the listeners learned a lot, and I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for listening every week and commenting and everything like that. I appreciate it, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me on.
All right, my pleasure. Well, I'll talk soon.
Okay,
bye. My next guest was also a junior high school and high school classmate of mine from the great little town of West Islip, New York, which is also on Long Island. I remember him best for his infectious laugh and great sense of humor. As a matter of fact, we laughed our way through our 10th grade biology class as lab partners. His name is Mark, and he joins us now from Sarasota, Florida. Mark, welcome to A Bunch of Malarkey.
Great. Awesome, Charlie. I'm happy to be a part of it.
So, Mark, you're down in Florida now. So how long did you stay in New York? At what age did you decide to leave New York and head elsewhere? And was Florida your first stop?
Florida has been my first and only stop out of New York. I actually went to college in Florida and then moved back and lived there for about 11, 12 years after.
Okay.
And then met a girl, and she was from Florida, and that brought me back to Florida.
So you've been there since what, the late 90s, early 2000s? Would you say?
Yeah, about 2004.
Okay.
Yep. So it's been I'm. You're always a New Yorker, I think.
Right.
But,
you can't take it out of us,
I've been
right?
here so long, I'm certainly a Floridian.
So the main reason you relocated is because your wife is from Florida and you decided to go back to her roots?
Yeah, we kind of knew that that's where we would eventually take. I mean, I was living in the city at the time, and I knew I wasn't going to live in the city forever. That I at one point would leave, and it made a lot of sense with my my in-laws down here,
right?
Just to come down.
And for those of you listening from that aren't from Long Island, when we say the city, that is New York City. That's just how Long Islanders say. When we say the city, there's only one city, and that's New York City.
That's true.
So, what did your Long Island friends and family say or think when you told them you were leaving New York and going to Florida? Because New Yorkers are proud people; they never think you should leave. So, what did your family and friends think when you said, "I'm going to Florida"?
Yeah, it's interesting to think back on it because there were the people who thought I was nuts, and there were the few people who were, happy, of course, for me, but very jealous and wished they could leave their job and get out of the area. And if I look back on those, the people who thought I was nuts are pretty much all still there. Right. and the people who wanted to leave, they eventually did.
So what do you think, Mark, were the most difficult adjustments you had to make when you relocated, if you can remember back to 2004 when you permanently left? What was really hard to adjust to down there?
I think the biggest thing, and I think most in speaking to other New Yorkers, is the pace of things.
Right.
Which is funny now because after all these years, I enjoy this pace. But in the beginning, it's hard to understand how people cannot do things quickly and efficiently and just move on to the next task while either driving or at the grocery store or whatever it is.
Right. So any other difficult adjustments besides the pace, like maybe the food, the climate, anything like that, or was that an easy adjustment?
Certainly the food. I mean, that's changed over the years too. But,
right.
But, when we first moved down here, the availability of stores that I was used to going to,
right.
That didn't even exist down here, things that, the discovery of Walmart, which is always interesting in itself.
Where the hell's the fresh mozzarella? Where's the basil? You got to go to like 10 stores for certain things. Well, in Florida, I don't think it's like that. When I moved here, it took me a while to find out I have to go to this store for that, because not everybody carried the same things that I was used to.
Right. And yes, there's no, but eventually, I'm not sure exactly how long you've been there, but you
8 years.
Actually forget these things existed.
Yeah, in a way,
and
you do.
And when you go back to New York or a city or Long Island or stuff, you're like, oh my goodness, it's almost like you went to a different country.
Forgot about this. So what were the easiest adjustments when you moved to Florida? What did you meshed well right away with what certain aspects of the lifestyle in Florida? What was real easy to transition to?
Well, I would say one of the best things, I mean, it was the cost of going out to eat and drink was so inexpensive. I would almost chuckle. We would chuckle. But Lori and I, especially because we left New York City, so we would, we would have a dinner and we would get the bill, and I'd be like, they must have forgotten something because it can't be $35 for us to be going out to dinner and a couple of drinks. That's 4 drinks, in New York back then, and I'm sure it's more expensive now. But so that was one of the great things. Look, just this for me, the sun out all the time and just the nice weather. It really made up for so much that I was missing.
Right, and when you talk about going out, I remember when we went to our first Atlanta Braves game, we were sitting so close to the dugout, I could reach out and touch one of the players, and I think the seats were like $30 a piece, so $60 for me and my wife. I'm like, you couldn't even get a bleacher seat where you're getting beer dumped on you, cursed at, beaten up. You couldn't even get that at Yankee Stadium for one ticket, $60 in the bleachers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But with that, I'm not sure what it's like in Atlanta. But you don't realize all the the extra entertainment you get for that ticket in New York.
Exactly. You get a little sideshow at the baseball game or wherever you go.
Shows, yeah.
So what do you miss about New York? What 3 things would you say you miss the most about living in New York on Long Island? Or do you miss anything?
I do. I miss my family because they're almost all still there. I miss grabbing a slice, which is non-existent down here. You have to
buy a whole pizza
almost everywhere,
and you can't say pie. You have to call it a pizza.
Right. Or I'm not sure over there, but here you have to actually explain to them that a regular.
Right.
is cheese.
Yes.
They want to know, well, what do you want? Just cheese? I'm like, yeah, that's a regular.
Yeah, exactly. A regular pie. That's great.
So the food, there's certain aspects of the food. The bagels, the pizza slices, the pizza itself is great. My family, and then, in the city, not so much Long Island, this part of it, but there's no energy anywhere I've ever experienced than living and working in New York City.
Right.
It's just such going to and from work. I'm a guy who likes to feed off of other people's energy. There's so much going on.
Right. You're right about that.
That's something to miss. I would say those.
Yeah, I feel that way when you go to a sporting event, or even I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and I've seen him 32 times, 8 different cities, and it's just a different energy he gives when he plays in like the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. He's still a great show in other cities, here in Atlanta, Baltimore, wherever I've seen him, but it's just a different energy. Just a totally different energy. Maybe because he's from up there and the people feed off of it. But even sporting events, sometimes I'll go to a Braves game or a Hawks game, and it seems like a minor league production compared to the Yankees or the Mets or the Red Sox or some of the big market teams. So I definitely know what you mean about the energy.
And I'm not sure what other questions are going to come, but I think that also may have to do, as far as sporting events and Bruce and like Billy Joel or something, is you kind of... For me, they're my guys. Those are my teams. You know, when I live down here and, maybe go to the Tampa Bucks or the Rays, and I like them, and they're fun to go to the games, but there's no, this is my team. That's for me.
No, I mean, I'll root for the Braves when I'm here, except if the Yankees come to town. But I don't feel that electricity in the air that, I don't know. And again, maybe it is part of it because it's not my team. But even with the fans that are fans of the Braves, I don't see that passion. I know for college sports down here, it's different. They're a lot more energetic and enthusiastic and electric about the college teams. But with the pro sports, I don't see that enthusiasm here with the Braves fans.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It is a little sad.
What 3 things do you miss the least about New York that you say to yourself, thank God I'm out of that shit, that crap?
Well, I think that I don't miss getting the finger. I mean, I just can picture driving back then, and people can be aggressive on certain highways down here in Florida too, but it seems like everyone is so, I don't know if it's stress or whatever, but everybody is so aggressive on the road,
right?
Like on Southern State or the LIE, that there's never a relaxed time, even if you have nowhere to go. You better find a place to go because they're coming.
So you didn't export the middle finger down to Florida when you went?
I did not do it, but I did. Some of my driving habits, I've been told, are very can be very New Yorkish. So.
Well, I don't pull the horn anymore because everybody's carrying around here. I learned real quickly. You might want to stay off the horn.
Yes. Yeah, well, so it's interesting because we both haven't been there. What is that like today up there? Because it's the same here in Florida. Some guy comes behind you, you just move to the side.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. So what else don't you miss besides the middle finger? Do you like?
I don't miss the cold weather, the brutal, every day, like here in Florida, you kind of know, it's going to be nice out. Either going to be raining or it's going to be somewhat nice. There, it's the weather can be, who knows what it's going to be, right? It could be 38 or it could be 65.
Right.
And it's just cold. And I remember always feeling like so tense because of the cold weather. Like my shoulders would all be cramped up and all that. So I certainly don't miss that. And to be honest with you, sometimes I don't miss my family either. So,
you like the buffer zone. You like the 1,200-mile buffer zone.
That's right, the buffer zone. Perfectly put. Yeah.
So you kind of touched on the next question a little bit. Have you visited New York since you moved, or do you frequently visit New York, or have you not been back, or?
No, I actually go back pretty much yearly because my family is still there. Now we've been starting to get invites to some weddings for nieces or young cousins. So I'm starting to go back more. But I used to go back for a few days a year at least, sometimes a week, and visit everybody. So I get my
you get your fill.
My taste. Yeah,
what are the most noticeable changes you've seen in your visits up to New York since you moved? Like, what have you gone up and say, wow, this has really changed, or this is different?
On Long Island, I feel like so many things are the same. I mean, I'm sure things have changed, but when you live in a place like Florida where entire communities go up in a period of 18 months, and that's such drastic change. So when I go back to Long Island, I'll see a new restaurant or maybe a new store or something. But there's no, there doesn't seem to be any huge changes that I've seen.
Right, and also in New York, like the same road projects are still being worked on from when we were kids. It's like they just passed the toolbox on to the next generation, like the Belt Parkway, the Wantagh Parkway. Like the grandsons now are working on it.
Right. Oh my goodness. There's no question that the amount of construction that's still going on is
it's like, what are they doing to that bridge? What are they doing to that parkway for that it's taken like 3 generations and 60 years to fix? I often wonder that.
Remember, and I'll keep it short because I don't worry. But I get on the way to you go to Jersey. If you take the Belt Parkway, there's still this. You come kind of around a bend just before you go under an overpass. There's still this pothole. I mean, it's been from when I was 18, I was 28, and now I go back and I drive it. And I'm like, there it is.
It's vintage. It's vintage. But here, it's like every place has its pros and cons, but I notice any type of road project, it's done quickly, it's transparent. You can go on a website and see what the budget is for it, how long it's going to take, and it's usually done within the time frame. Up there, it's like endless. The same road it's just an endless project, and I've yet to figure out why.
Yeah, that is. But I agree with you. You're right. They do get done quicker here. They do seem to move along.
So what have you gotten used to, Mark, in Florida that you couldn't do without going forward, that you like? Maybe it's not your last stop in life, Florida, but right now you say, I would not want to be away from this. What aspect of Florida would you say you would not want to be without?
I think just really the weather, it's part of the weather. I mean, obviously what the weather affords you to do is to always be outside if you want to be outside. Right. So if you, and I would love to tell you that I'm over the beach all the time. It's one of those things that, like when you live in New York City, I think I went to one Broadway show a year.
You take it for granted, right?
Right. And then here it's the same thing. I'm going to the beach not too often, but we are going out, if we want to go and play tennis and go, do some stuff. Not that I play, but my son plays a lot of soccer. So, it just affords you to be able to just be outside and enjoy people's backyards and pools.
Right.
And that's kind of what I know now. And I would have a hard time going to a place that was cold. And I think, and going out because I wouldn't be happy in the cold weather.
So would you ever relocate back to New York? Could you see yourself ever moving back there? Long Island, New York area? You can be honest.
Yeah, I don't ever see it. I'm not, I'm just such a different person than I was when I lived there.
Right.
And New Yorkers, I'm super proud to be a New Yorker.
Sure.
I mean, I brag about it. I really, in my heart, feel like, it's just something so to be proud of, because it's really nobody. I have to be, when I meet a New Yorker, like someone who's a new New Yorker, I know the person is going to get stuff done in business. They're going to fight for what's right for their kid or themselves. They're hard people and they're tough. You know, when you become soft, nothing against the South. I'm sure this isn't the case for everybody, but I've gotten so much softer because
you're like a Carvel soft serve.
Right, that's it. Maybe it is the sun that melts you, but it's not so much the, I just find that you just have to be tough in New York to make it, you know, and I guess there's a song for that, right? But,
right. And you can dial it back a little bit when you go to other parts of the country.
Right. And I wouldn't
and still make it.
Have to do that again to live up there and be that tough.
So what advice, Mark, would you give to a New Yorker that is thinking about relocating to your state or any part of the country for that matter, but more specifically Florida because it's something you're familiar with? What advice would you give them that they're kind of on the fence and should I leave, should I not? What advice would you give them about relocating?
I would say, it depends on what's keeping you there, but take the leap, go and leave. I guess you could always go back, but to me, I would say do it, and expand your horizons and understand that, believe it or not, there is life outside of Long Island.
That's what my other guests have said too.
Yeah, and it actually, I think it's made me become so much more understanding of so many other things in life because you meet people that come from, especially Florida. Florida is great for meeting somebody who's from North Carolina, somebody who's from Vermont, and somebody who's from Chicago.
Right.
And I mean, everybody likes to come down here, and next door neighbors are from all over the country. So you take on people's different views, and I think that where in Long Island, there's a lot of
same way of thinking.
Right, no question. You either have it seems to me you have the Long Island mentality, or you have the city mentality, right? You either work in the city and you understand the city, or you never go into the city ever,
right?
For some reason. And I used to say that. I say to my family, I was like, when I lived in the city, I was like, I don't understand why no one's coming into the city. So people are getting on a plane right now in Hong Kong to come to this city.
Right.
And you guys can't make it 40 minutes over the bridge.
It's those bridges. Like the first time I drove into Atlanta from the suburbs, it was weird how you just drove from the suburbs and you were in a city without crossing something or going under something. It was very strange to me.
Yes. That's true. You're right. It is very unique that way.
And I also think New Yorkers, and some people that know me or listen to the show that are native New Yorkers that are still there, they might be offended by the topic this week, leaving Long Island and the stats, and my having people on that have left New York. And I get it, because when I lived in New York, I was one of those New Yorkers that never thought I was going to leave, and you better not say anything about New York. When you live there, you can complain about everything, the traffic, the taxes, the people, everything. But it's like a family member. You're allowed to criticize them, but somebody else isn't. And that's what I notice about the mentality of New Yorkers. If you are amongst the New Yorkers and still there, you're allowed to criticize it all you want. You bitch about it to each other. But once you leave, or if it's somebody that never lived there, you're not allowed to say anything bad about it.
It's a very good observation. Yes, I would say that I've had that pushback from my family, and once again, I mean, I want to, and I've said it before, but I want to emphasize it. There is truly, I'm so proud to be a New Yorker. And matter of fact, even all these years, people will say, "Oh, where are you from?"
Right.
Or where do you live? And I'm like, well, I'm in, I live so and so, and I'm like, I'm a New Yorker though. You know?
Right.
And most of the time people go, oh, gee, with the accent, I didn't notice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and maybe my New York Yankees flag hanging outside my house kind of gives it away, too, here in the Atlanta metro suburbs. Well, Mark, it's been great having you. I really appreciate you spending some time on the show, and thanks for being a listener as well. And it was great talking to you after all these years, and we'll hope to have you on again with some of our funny New York, Long Island growing up kind of stories.
Yeah, I would love it, and I love being on the show, and I love listening to the show. I get such a chuckle out of some of your stories, so I definitely would love to come back.
All right, well, thanks for and continued success down in the Sunshine State, but just don't become, quote unquote, that Florida man. All right, take care, Mark. Thanks for coming on.
Great, thanks a lot.
My next guest was a huge part of my teenage years. On any given Friday or Saturday night from, say, 1985 through 1987 or so, you'd find me at his house, listening to music, watching movies or baseball, playing Coleco and television video games, or making prank phone calls. Many of my best teenage memories involve him, and he's a big supporter of this podcast as he listens weekly and comments often. His name is Will, and he joins us now from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Will, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, definitely. And I like how you preface that, the Commonwealth of Virginia, because, I like pointing out that we're not technically a state.
Well, I want to get it right. well, I appreciate all your support with the show and your friendship and everything, and I wanted to have you on sooner, but better late than never, right?
Oh, yeah. Anytime we can do it.
So tell the listeners, how long did you live in New York? We know you were born and raised. We grew up together, but when did you leave New York? How many years were you there, and what was your first stop out in New York?
Well, I lived in New York for 27 years. By that time, I'd been with my wife for several years. We got married, and pretty much soon after we came back from our honeymoon, decided to get out and try something different out in New York. It was just getting too expensive, and tried to try something different. And so we had moved to Memphis for a little bit. She went to the University of Memphis,
okay,
and got her teaching degree. And Memphis, great place to hang out. Great, great for a young couple. We had many fun, very late nights, early mornings there with a bunch of friends that we met. But just didn't feel it was the kind of place we wanted to raise a family.
Right.
So, once she had her teaching degree, we had been through this area of Virginia, in Appomattox, Virginia, many times visiting some of her family that lived here on our drives back to New York.
Right.
And it reminded me a lot of upstate New York. Virginia, pretty much most of it, and the upstate New York are virtually identical. A lot of small farm communities, small towns,
right,
places where the houses aren't stacked on top of each other. And, the people, from traveling through, it seemed pretty cool and seemed like a good place to start a family. And it put us in a good triangle of the middle, because by that time, some of my family had gone to Florida.
Right.
And so we could easily go back for a weekend to visit our friends in Memphis, go to New York for a weekend, or go to Florida, which
right,
put us in a good spot in the middle of a triangle.
So what was the main reason you left New York? You just wanted to try something else? Was it the cost of living?
Yeah, mostly, I guess, a sense of adventure, a new couple, just getting out of our comfort zone, try something different, try a new area. And yeah, I guess the biggest thing with most people is just the expense of living there. Thinking about, most of the reasons why everybody complains about New York and traffic and all those sorts of things.
Right.
That's all in there. But mostly the expense and the traffic and just the everyday, hammering.
Right.
Just trying to do something.
So what did your Long Island friends and family say and think when you told them you were leaving New York and going to Tennessee?
A few of them, were very shocked. Mostly everybody was very understanding. A lot of them were like, yeah, I wish I could do that, and
right,
blah, blah, blah. Some people, of course, are like, hell, what the hell's wrong with you? I'd never leave New York.
Right.
And, but, like I said, wherever you go, there's stuff you can do. It just depends on, I guess, where your goals lie and
right,
whatever else. And I figured, with some of my dreams and different things, I figured they would be better suited trying something outside of New York. We really didn't have an idea of where to go at first, but my wife had some family living in Memphis, and having visited there, I was like, all right, it's cool. It's built up. It's, it's a city, so it won't be such a culture shock, from moving into the middle of nowhere. But it was actually a weird culture shock in a different way, because, obviously these all have separate incidents, but, it's the kind of place where you could walk in, walk into the store, and I have like a big old farmer like looking at me saying, "Nice earrings, boy," and then like on the way out of the store, I got 3 skinheads walking by me like, "What's up, brother?" I'm like, "I'm not your brother."
Right.
And then I'll drive away from the store, and I got a bunch of black kids chasing my truck, telling me to get the hell out of their neighborhood. So like, you couldn't win no matter where you went.
A fine mix. What were the most difficult adjustments you had to make when you relocated? What did you find the most challenging?
Probably the culture difference. A lot of people talk about Southern hospitality, and I do think, there's like everywhere I've ever lived, we generally tend to congregate around like friendly people, cool people, But, the biggest thing was, just getting past that Mason-Dixon line and, realizing, like, to me that the Southern hospitality was nice in the store and whatever else. But when it really comes down to it, I think Northerners get the brunt of things for, like that we're rude or whatever. But I think it's just we're fast-paced, we're very honest and to the point. And, look, I don't like you, but I can deal with you. Let's move on. Kind of attitude. Whereas as down here, you get that, oh, honey, bless your heart kind of thing. And as soon as you turn around, like, they're immediately talking crap about you.
Right. They're not as real as we are.
Like a north-south thing. It's just like among themselves. Like, I watched this behavior happen.
Oh, absolutely.
In Memphis. It's just crazy, how, people just kind of pussyfoot around the issue instead of just, hey, we don't like each other, but we're good. We can still live next door to each other, whatever. And it's actually, it's taken a while, like getting friends and, people to hang out with around here just because, sometimes there's it takes a little learning curve for people to get used to me and realize, how I live my life and through honesty and everything. And usually it takes, like I said, a little bit longer, but those people are more valued for it. Like, they really appreciate the fact of who I am.
Right.
After they figure out that, like 95% of what I'm saying is sarcastic or whatever, but trying to, just be a cool person and cohabitate with people.
Right. What would you say the 3 things you miss the most about New York or Long Island, if anything?
Well, and number one, just because I spent so much time there and I worked there for several years, is the beach. Living about 5 minutes over the bridge from the beach, that was always a lot of fond memories, whether racing cars over the bridge or just actually going to the beach and hanging out. And even then, like, just going over the winter and just looking out at the water. That's one thing I miss anywhere. And, for here now where we live, we're about 3 hours to the coast. So, we still do have access to a beach, and it's just not something we do every day, every weekend anymore.
Right.
Probably the most thing that affects us, especially now with our young kids, we really want to be involved with music and everything. It's just the easy access to concert venues, whether it's like clubs like Sundance that used to be in Bayshore.
Right.
Was amazing. I spent most of any money I made as a kid going there for $15 concerts, seeing crazy bands like Megadeth or whoever happened to be playing before they blew up. And, or Nassau Coliseum, or taking the train into Madison Square Garden.
We went to many a concert together in the 80s at Coliseum and Garden.
So just the accessibility to that stuff, or Jones Beach, during the warmer months,
Right.
Yeah, most of my youth money was spent on either buying music or going to see it live. And so that was definitely something I missed about it, because around here, there's really not many places. I mean, we easily have to drive at least an hour to Richmond, or usually it's like 3 hours to North Carolina or up to D.C. area to see a decent, arena show.
Right.
And, although this area of Virginia, they're really coming up with some of these cool festivals. There was just a Blue Ridge Rock Festival here, which there was a lot of, like, 90s whatever bands, like Godsmack and Cold and Offspring or whatever. Like, I didn't go, obviously, I was working the whole weekend, but it's pretty cool. Like, within a half hour, they had this major festival, which second year they were doing it, and it seemed to go off pretty well. Actually, my family, my wife and kids, went for Saturday, and they loved to see DMX and some other old has-beens. They had a great time.
Right. So
probably the third thing and the most important thing about missing is the accessibility of and variety of food.
Right.
And it's a very weird thing. Like, you hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I miss the pizza and whatever else."
The bagels.
The thing is, if people know what they're doing, it's just a chemical reaction. So there's some actually really good pastry chef kind of people that know how to adjust a little bit of oil, a little bit of extra salt, or whatever. And you get a pizza just as good here if you do, but it's not like every corner.
Right,
you
exactly.
Walk in anywhere and get a good pizza.
You have to do your research.
yeah, you got to find your research, you know, and it's actually kind of ironic, you know, like I say, I miss you know, the accessibility to food. You know, I don't want to call anybody out, you know, get anybody in trouble here, but, you know, our mutual friend Brian loves to come visit me here because there's a Pizza Hut. And I'm like, why the hell do you want to eat Pizza Hut? You have accessibility to great pizza, whatever, and there's just something about, I don't know what kind of crack they put in that pizza, but.
Shame on you, Brian, if you're Brian, if you're listening, shame on you. So do you visit, Will, do you visit New York often since you moved? Or and if so, what are the...
Generally, try and get there about once a year, if not more. You know, sometimes, unfortunately, like through somebody passing away or, you know, maybe on a good note, somebody having a party or, you know, having a wedding or something. Or, you know, graduation party. You know, we usually at least once a year. I know Renee and the kids get to go, you know, a couple more times a year to go for like a long weekend or whatever else. But yeah, we usually try and get back at least once, and then we kind of rotate, you know, Florida in the picture, and then like probably every 3 years we'll go back to Memphis and hang out with a group of friends that we had there.
What are the most noticeable changes you've seen in New York since you've left on your return visits?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I didn't notice anything major, you know, like. But the biggest thing is just overall, like, it's always been sprawling and whatever else, but it seems like every time I go back, like, every house is now a double level, like, landscaped yards. It's like all this, like keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. It's just like everybody, you don't have any land to do anything or spread anything, so it's just like keeps building on top and on top and on top. And
right.
That's the biggest thing I noticed. You know, you get maybe one store that closes that you liked or another, you know, something new opened up. You know, you've seen a lot less maybe mom and pop kind of cool neighborhood places, and you know, what used to be like a really cool neighborhood bar is now another Buffalo Wild Wing or whatever else. So that was kind of a, you know, a disappointing thing I've noticed.
So what have you gotten used to there in the Commonwealth of Virginia that you couldn't do without going forward? It might not be your last stop in life, but what do you like so much about where you are now that it would be difficult to give up if you had to move?
I guess the biggest part of it is just the peace and quiet of not being right on top of your neighbors. Like, you know, like, you know, where we lived in New York, you could spit and you hit your neighbor's house. So it's nice, you know, being around, you know, an area. Like, I never would have thought I wanted to live where I do.
Right.
But when we did move to the area, we looked around. They had, like, a suburban kind of area in the middle of town. And, you know, it was like half an acre of property.
Right.
And then for the same exact price, the same builder out, you know, had like a 2-acre property with the same exact house on it. And we're like, why not have 2 acres? You know, I remember we used to ride around in New York on our bikes and like find those, you know, like rare empty lots where people had carved out like cool BMX trails.
Yeah, remember that bike path on 3rd Street we used to go in?
Yeah, that was exactly the thing. Like when I looked at my property, I looked at that back because about my front acre is all open, and the whole back is all like forest basically.
Right.
And it's just been one of those things. Like each summer, I clear out a little bit more and a little bit more. You know, as my kids get older, and hell, I'd love to go back on a mountain bike or something and rampage through that thing. But, yeah, I thought it was cool to have your own. You know, like I have my own bike trail, I have my own baseball diamond, I have my own volleyball court.
Nice.
So yeah, I guess it's just missing. You know, like what I wouldn't like to change. Like if I ever moved anywhere again, I'd want it to be somewhere quiet, like not right on top of other people. Right. It's nice having that little bit of privacy, but yet you can walk over to the neighbor's house in a minute, you know, and borrow a cup of sugar if you need to.
So would you ever relocate back to New York? And if yes, why? Or if no, why?
Just at this point, I think I doubt it. It seems like most of the people, most people are just moving out of New York anyway. I mean, I do think there's going to be some diehard people that are always just going to live in New York no matter what. And, you know, it's nice to go and visit. You know, I like it as a destination.
Right.
But not a place to live. You know, it'd have to be something amazing happen, like all of a sudden I become a famous writer for Saturday Night Live or the Colbert Report or something, and I have to relocate.
Right.
Or whatever, you know, something where the means to live was a lot easier. But I'd still probably keep the house here as like my weekend getaway.
Nice. So we'll close it out with this question. What advice would you give to a New Yorker that is kind of like on the fence about moving, they're thinking about relocating to either your state that you're in now in Virginia or to another part of the country? What advice would you give them?
I think get out and give it a try. I mean, you know, between like either, you know, checking out, using your vacations for planning a move, you know, spending a week around a place or if you have any friends that have moved out, like, get in touch with them and see about, coming out and hanging out and checking out the area.
Right.
I mean, everywhere you go, you're going to find the good people. You'll eventually find the good food places. With the real advice, I mean, especially if you're like live in New York now and you own a home or whatever else, you could find some really nice land and build your own dream house from scrap. Like, I know one guy, he bought a plot of land, and then he built like a very cheap, or cheap considering how much housing costs are, built a 2-car garage with a loft apartment above it, and then like every 5 years he'd add on another section of the house, and now he's got this huge, beautiful home with a whole guest house right above the garage. Right. And, he did all that for like probably a third of what it might cost to live in New York, and he's built the house exactly how he wants it. It's not like inheriting somebody else's problems or anything.
Well, I really, really appreciate not only you coming on the show today and your insight, and I'm sure it'll be valuable to a lot of people listening, but I really appreciate your support of the show. I know you listen often and you comment a lot, and we really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend a few minutes with me.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like I said, it's a highlight of my week, my Monday nights, or sometimes if I'm bushed from work, Tuesday night.
Right.
Just sit on the porch, have a couple beers, and then enjoy listening and, hearing a familiar voice from home. It's nice. You don't get that often, especially with my schedule. I rarely get to talk to anybody, so it's kind of like I get to hang out with you every week. Well,
I appreciate it. We'll definitely have to have you on. Whether you come visit Atlanta, you'll be here live in the King Springs studio, or we'll definitely do something by phone, and I'm sure we could fill an hour just on some of the crazy stories we used to do.
Definitely, man.
All right, thanks for...
Talk to you. I look forward to hearing myself. Well, actually, I don't look forward to hearing myself. But I look forward to listening to the show Monday.
All right, thanks for calling in.
You got it, man. Have a good day.
All right, you too. My final guest on the show today was a coworker of mine back in the days of MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, and the CNC Music Factory. The place where we worked together, Herman's World of Sporting Goods at the Roosevelt Field Mall, is well documented here on A Bunch of Malarkey in the episodes Crazy Coworker Chronicles and Crazy Coworker Chronicles Volume 2. She was one of my favorite coworkers of all time. Her name is Marie, and she joins us now from the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Marie, welcome to A Bunch of Malarkey. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
It's great to talk to you after all these years. We were just talking off the air that we can't believe it's 30 years since we worked together, but we won't give away our ages or anything, right?
Yeah, let's stop there.
So, Marie, you live in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I'm glad you survived the hurricane okay and everything. When did you decide to leave? Well, first of all, how long did you live in New York?
Well, here comes where I give up my age. 35. I lived in New York for 35 years.
Okay. And you've been in your current state for about 9 or 10.
Yeah, 10.
Okay. So, that's all right. You're younger than me. So why did why did you just decide to relocate to North Carolina? What made you decide to go to North Carolina?
Well, I was never going to relocate to North Carolina, actually.
Okay.
my parents had moved here 10 years before I did. We used to vacation here, and I loved visiting them here, but I was never going to leave New York. And then I met my husband, who lives here. And so we dated long distance, and then I moved to North Carolina.
Yeah, I was surprised to see you move, Marie. You're one of those proud New Yorkers I never thought would leave.
Yes, I was never going to leave. I was never going to leave.
So when you told all your friends in New York and the family members that remained in New York that you were leaving to move to North Carolina, what did they say or think?
They were happy that I was going to be closer to my parents, and my brother and his family is here, so are here. They were happy about that, but surprised I was leaving. Some said I was leaving, but you have to. Everybody wants you to do what's best for you.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
What were the most difficult adjustments you had to make when you relocated?
Oh man, so the most difficult. At the time when I moved, there's still most difficult now, but the most difficult at the time when I moved was I moved here towards the end of October, and that is just when our tourism has died down here on the Outer Banks. And then everything shuts down. At the time, everything was shutting down, and there is nothing to do. And like literally nothing to do. Restaurants close, bars close, everything. So I got here at a time when it was like, what have I done?
It wasn't hustling and bustling. It was on the off season.
No,
so did you have to like drive to the mainland across the bridge to get to things that you wanted to do?
Yes. So anything that we want to do, like the mall or the airport or Costco, is about an hour and 45 minutes away.
Wow.
So we did a lot of that the winter that I moved here.
A lot of shopping.
My parents are here, so that was good. Yes, a lot of shopping. And my parents are here, so that was good. I had them to entertain me.
Right.
And we were planning our wedding, so I had that. But
you had a distraction at first.
Yes.
So,
thank goodness.
Any other difficult adjustments besides the like loneliness of not everybody being around and the off season?
So now I find like being the convenience of New York, like everything is there. Whatever you want, it's right there. When I lived in Brooklyn, you could walk out the front door and turn right or left, and you had your choice of Chinese restaurants, Italian, laundry, go do this, go do that, whatever. I don't have that here. And the food.
Right.
The food. I miss all the food in New York. But that's...
What adjustments were easy when you moved? Like, what did you settle right into? And was it like the beach lifestyle? What was easy for you?
Yes, it absolutely was. It was the beach lifestyle. It was out being, running errands and stopping at the beach to just sit at the ocean and just enjoy where I was living.
Very therapeutic compared to Long Island and Brooklyn, right?
Yes, very much. And it's very slow here also compared to Long Island and Brooklyn. So.
Now, the next question, I pretty much know what you're going to say, but the listeners don't, because we're friends on Facebook and we've been friends a long time. And what 3 things do you miss the most about New York?
Pizza, the convenience, and my friends and family.
Okay. Well, you haven't been able to find like good pizza, like where you are through trial and error and research. You still haven't been able to find that?
No.
Really?
Nope. No. If I've found pizza that's good, but it's not New York.
Right.
There's nothing like. I recently took a road trip with a friend from here. We decided right before we left, we were like, how about Friday we drive to New York in the afternoon and we go get pizza? And so we did. And we drove to New York and we had pizza in Brooklyn Friday. And
I think I saw you went to Nathan's too, didn't you? I thought I saw on the post.
We went to Coney Island and we rode the Cyclone and the Thunderbolt and we drank beer all day and had more pizza and had Italian food, and then we came home Sunday.
There you go.
So no, we don't really have good pizza. We have like okay pizza if you lower your standards and you're not from New York. But
what 3 things do you miss the least about New York? What do you say to yourself like on any given day? Like, wow, I'm glad I'm not dealing with that anymore. 3 things you don't miss about New York.
I don't miss the congestion, the rat race and rushing around, and working insane amounts of hours a day just to keep doing it and be able to live there. Right.
Yeah, it seems to be the common theme with a lot of the interviews I've done for this episode. And same thing, one of the main reasons my wife and I relocated here to Georgia. Now, we know you have visited New York since you moved, because we just talked about that. Do you frequently visit? And if so, what are the most noticeable changes that you've seen in New York since you moved 10 years ago?
I haven't been visiting much. I was visiting very frequently for a while. It is very, very more so congested than it used to be. And the traffic is crazy. You can't go anywhere without sitting in traffic. It's just crowded and...
Well, being that you live like on a barrier island now and you're like in a wide open space, do you feel like when you go visit some of the places maybe where you used to live or hang out, do you feel like it's like a lot smaller and closed in now that you're used to like open spaces?
I do. I do. But at the same time, when I go and I'll visit New York, I love the energy at the same time.
Right.
Like,
it's
all
unlike
that,
anywhere else,
you know?
right? Yeah.
It is. It is. Mm-hmm.
What have you gotten used to in your current state, where you live now, that you couldn't do without going forward? Where you maybe it's not your last stop in life, but where you live now, you say, I couldn't do without this.
Being near the ocean, being near some water,
Right.
It just is it's so calming, and just, to be able to take a minute and go to the beach and just sit there, and, whenever something's going on in life, I find myself at the beach, and
Right.
it just brings me down, like calms me down, or, brings me back to a good place. And so I would want to be near the water somewhere.
Yeah,
wherever it is.
I mean, I love the beaches in New York. I lived in Long Beach for a long time, and I grew up near Robert Moses, just a 5-minute drive over the bridge, and I love the beaches in New York. But I'll tell you, I visited the Outer Banks, up and down from Cape Hatteras up to Katy Hawk, the whole up and down, and they're some of the most beautiful beaches I've ever stepped on. They really are beautiful. So you're really lucky to have that right in your front yard or backyard, whatever it is.
I know. It's both.
Yeah. So would you ever relocate to New York someday? Would you ever do it?
Not back to New York, no. I would relocate, but not to New York.
So you wouldn't go back, even though you love it and miss it so much. And why not? Why wouldn't you ever go back?
I think because I'm at a different point in my life now. Like, I think I love New York for the single, not a mother Marie.
Okay. You're at a different stage in your life.
For raising a child, for raising a child and stuff like that. I don't think that I could do New York the way I would want to do it for my son.
Right.
For financially, I don't, it just wouldn't be. So, no, I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't move back.
Do you think a lot of people that leave New York that still kind of miss it are more, they're missing the nostalgia and what it once was when they were younger than what it is now?
Yes.
So you think it's just the ties and the roots that they have that they miss more than what it would actually be if they moved back?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of agree
when I
with
go
that.
back, when I go back, like even this last trip that I just took with my girlfriend, I went and did all the things I used to do.
Right.
I didn't do new stuff. I did the stuff that always made me happy when I was there.
Right.
And the stuff that I love about New York. So.
And I look at it now where, like a guy like my dad, my parents were just blue-collar workers, middle class, working at a supermarket. They could never have a house and a car and a yard and raise 3 kids there now. So the Long Island that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore.
No, it doesn't.
So that's why kind of like I'll always have my roots there, and I'll always love it. But I just think I'm more in love with what it was when I was a teenager or a kid than I do what it is now, than I'm in love with it now. So
exactly.
What advice, Marie, would you give to a New Yorker that is thinking about relocating to your state or somewhere else in the country? What advice would you give to them in preparation for moving or trying to convince them to take the leap?
My first advice would be eat all the pizza before you go. I think make sure you're ready to do it.
Right.
If you make sure you're ready but do it. Do it because you'll be glad you did. I don't regret leaving New York. I'm glad I made the change.
Do you wish you did it sooner, or was it just the right time for you?
I think it was the right time. I definitely don't wish I did it sooner. I think it was the right time.
Besides your parents leaving and going there, were your other friends leaving to go to other states, and were you hearing about their journeys and stories? And did you sometimes question, like, what am I still doing here when you were in New York? Everybody seems to be doing better off financially when they're leaving, and I'm still here. Were you ever second-guessing yourself before you made the decision to move?
Well, when I left, none of my friends or family had left other than my parents and my brother. I was kind of the first, and probably they're all still there. So maybe one of the very few, if not only, to leave.
Right. And
What was the other thing you asked me?
No, I said, well, and being that your parents were already on, and your husband, your future husband at the time, was already from there, you probably didn't have to do a lot of research because they were there long enough to tell you what goes on there, and you didn't have to do the research that someone's just going cold turkey and just leaving New York.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was probably more comforting,
right?
right?
My family. Yes, because if I didn't have my family here, I don't know that I would have come.
Right.
And I had vacationed here and visited my parents here plenty to know what to expect from the Outer Banks. And, when the seasons change, and in the summer, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people come every Saturday or Sunday. Every week it's a changeover.
Right.
And then in the winter, there's like just, less than, 100,000 people that live here. I don't know the number, but so I knew to expect that. But I struggled with the decision to move here. I definitely did. I struggled with it for a few weeks, and even being, knowing I could be be near my family, and I was going to be near my parents again, and my nephew and niece who were just babies at the time, but I would make up, be able to watch them grow up and stuff, and make up for the time I missed. But I struggled with it, and I struggled a lot.
Sure.
And then I just one day was like, screw it, I'm just going to do it. If it's
right,
if
you
it's
could always go back, right?
Always go back to New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I said my great apartment with the great rent might be gone, but I could probably have my job, and I'll figure it out. I knew I could come back or go back. So.
Oh, that's good advice. So the final question, we'll close it out with this one.
Mm-hmm.
People around the country have a stereotype of New Yorker. We're rough, we're abrasive, we're rude, whatever. And New Yorkers have stereotypes of other parts of the country. What would you tell a New Yorker about North Carolina that is like a misconception to a New Yorker? They might think it's like, rednecks or whatever. I hear a lot about the South. What would you say about your state that you live in now that gives you pride about North Carolina? What would you say to a New Yorker about North Carolina that they may not know about?
I would say that the Outer Banks, at least, I don't know about the rest of the state, and it is a big state.
Yes.
But the Outer Banks where I am is a wonderful, wonderful community. It is amazing how everybody pulls together when a storm blows through and people have to, rebuild, or when someone in the community is sick, or everybody just comes together, and it's a wonderful feeling of community. And I love being a part of that and living in a place that's like that. And I don't think that people realize that, because you used the term redneck before, and that's exactly what I think people think of, Southerners or North Carolina.
Oh, absolutely,
whatever.
Sure.
And it's not. There are some, for sure.
Right, there's rednecks in upstate New York also.
Yes, exactly. But that's not, there's so much more, But I'm going to say that the way that people just come together and support each other and lift each other up and, help each other in a time of need, whatever it is.
Oh, that's great. And I'll say from your Facebook post, you could tell you're a proud New Yorker, and you never really say anything bad about New York. I'm sure, some of the things that you don't miss about it, that's just normal. But you're also a good ambassador for where you live now. You seem to be very proud and very happy where you live now, and I think you're a good ambassador for the Outer Banks and for your community, and I really admire that you were able to go from being so proud of one place, and now I would say you're equally as proud of where you are now.
Yeah, I am. I think so. I haven't been here quite as long, but I like it. I do like it, and I am proud of where I live and my, the people that I know, and
Right. Well, Marie, I really appreciate you taking the time out today to come on the show. Don't hang up once we say goodbye, because we'll talk quickly off the air. But I really appreciate you coming on and spending a few minutes with me and just enlightening our audience a bit about the Outer Banks and your personal journey from New York and relocating to North Carolina. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was like a This Is Your Life episode for me. It was so great to hear from everybody. It's one thing to talk to people on Facebook, folks, but it's one thing to talk to them on the phone. And I want to thank everybody who came on the show. I really enjoyed every conversation. I really enjoyed hearing, how everybody is doing. And I think it's very informative for the listener. As you can see, everybody's journey is different. Everybody's reasoning is different. Everybody has their likes and dislikes, different likes and dislikes, and reasons why they left. And I think it's really informative. Again, I could read stats. I could have read an hour's worth of stats of why people are leaving the place where I grew up. But like I mentioned in the call with Marie, I believe, the Long Island I once knew and loved no longer exists. And I think that's a big reason why we left. My dad didn't have a great education, nor did my mom. They struggled. They worked hard. They had blue-collar jobs. But you know what? They lived somewhat of the American dream. They were able to buy a house, have a car, raise 3 kids, have a little backyard with a pool, and go to work every day like the average American, come home and enjoy what they had. We didn't take big vacations, but we did what we could. But someone like my dad, a blue-collar worker, 2 blue-collar workers, would never be able to survive or make it on Long Island today. And that saddens me that it's only there's only opportunity for certain people now, and that's why people are leaving. We left Long Island and New York. You know, we left family behind who we miss very much, who I'm happy to go to see over the next week or so. But I have to say, folks, as my friends and family started leaving New York, first my brother, followed by my parents, then my sister, then close friends moving all over the country. And the feedback I got from every single one of them after they left is how much greater they were doing, how the cost of housing wasn't taking up 50, 60, 70% of their monthly income. They had more disposable income. They were able to take vacations. But most of all, they were able to save money and cut their credit card debt and live debt-free, other than their mortgages, and live a better life and be able to do more things with their kids. And although we don't have children, this is why we left. We wanted a better life where we weren't struggling every month and wondering how are we going to do this, or just not wanting to live under that constant, it felt like New York, everybody was always motoring around, everybody looked angry all the time, and it wasn't because we're mean people, and I think that's why people say New Yorkers are rude, New Yorkers are mean. It's because New Yorkers are under so much pressure to make it just to survive, and I and my wife didn't want to do that anymore. And I'll tell you, folks, I was one of those proud New Yorkers. If you would have told me 15, 20 years ago that I'd be living in Georgia, that I would ever leave New York, I would have said, you are out of your minds. I was one of those New Yorkers who traveled to other states, but only the vacation destinations. I had a stereotype of the South, of different states, and until you go there and you get out of those touristy areas and you get into the communities and you see that, hey, this is pretty awesome, you realize that there is life outside of New York, there is life outside of Long Island, and it's a better life for the most part. Again, you're going to miss things. You're going to miss the roots where you grew up. You're going to miss things. You're going to miss certain foods. But you know what? The trade-off for maybe not the best pizza, which is a great pizza in Atlanta. We're a melting pot. There are people from all over the country here. And I've found pizza in Atlanta that rivals any pizza I found had in New York. There are good restaurants here of all cultures. But you're going to miss certain things, folks. But the trade-off to not have a bagel on Sunday that meets my standards, I'll trade that bagel for not having to pay $13,000 a year in property taxes, folks. So you have to weigh what's important. Is having a good slice of pizza once a week and the best bagel you can get more important than living a life that is better for you, that is healthier for you, that is mentally better for you and your kids? Or is that bagel and that pizza more important? So everybody has their reasons for staying, for leaving. I'm not encouraging anybody to leave. I'm not encouraging anybody to stay. I wanted to point out what's happening in the place I grew up and I love and why people are leaving. And I wanted you to hear people's personal stories. And I hope it was informative to all of you because I enjoyed the conversations, not only because I care about everybody I spoke to and they're all great people. And I wanted to hear their stories that maybe from seeing their post on Facebook, I know where they live, but I don't know why they moved there. I don't know what their story was. And to hear that and to share that with you was very important to me. So again, folks, there will not be a show next week on the 23rd of September as I will be traveling to Long Island. And I don't know what to expect, to be honest with you. I don't know. It's my first trip back. I don't know. I'm happy to see family. I'm going to have a great time. But as far as the surroundings and everything, I have no idea how much it's changed. I'm walking into unfamiliar territory, if you can believe that, after spending 40 years there. But we'll see what happens, and I'll give you guys an update when I get back. So we'll be back to close out the month of September on Monday, September 30th. So I hope you have a good 2 weeks. I hope this little bit longer episode gets you through the next couple of weeks. And I'll miss you guys. I always miss doing the show. But then, once I return on the 30th, we have a straight run until the holidays, folks. So whether you're traveling to any of the states my guests are from today, North Carolina, Florida, Alabama, wherever you're traveling or wherever you're living, folks, I always say you have to beware, because it's a shit show out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to vote for Mutant of the Week on Tuesday. And have a great next couple of weeks, and I will catch you on the 30th. Take care, everybody.